Hi families, this is Emily from the Special Needs Resource Foundation of San Diego, the nonprofit arm of San Diego Family Magazine. Each Tuesday, we're going to bring you a picture book or a mid-grade kid lit book that has a special calling to kids with special needs. And we're going to do a couple art projects or sensory related activities or maybe even an exercise that's related to the book so that we keep a kind of a curriculum based idea flowing. So today we're just going to talk about what adaptations mean. Next week we'll be starting our first art project, but today we're just going to look at how parents might help adapt a project if their kid is in an inclusive setting that everyone else is doing, but their child might not have the same abilities as other children. So we can try to make this as meaningful to the child as possible. So basically for each art project, we're going to be looking at, is it important to the child? Is it part of their curriculum and learning? Does the child have a buy-in? Are they interested in art, or is there a reward, or is there, by finishing this, do they have a sense of pride in themselves? And then what is their ability? Do they have, what are their strengths, and do they have any intellectual or physical impairments that would prevent them from fully grasping the whole project as a typical child might create it? So what I have done is created this piece of art, which could be like children's books authors Lois Ehlert or Eric Carle, Very Hungry Caterpillar or Growing Tomato Soup. These authors use collage, either from works collected, pieces of things collected in the world, like seed pods or leaves. And they also use really, kind of messy sensory ways to put paint on paper, and then they cut those pieces out or tear those pieces out and create works of art. So this piece could be curricular for many reasons. First of all, for science, you could be labeling the parts of a flower. It could be that your child is learning colors, like orange and blue are opposite on the color wheel, or that if you mix orange or red and yellow together, you get orange, or blue and yellow together to get green. So the most important thing is that whatever the child is doing is meaningful. If it's not meaningful for the child, then you should not be putting your parent energy into that. And the teachers, I think, would understand that as well, especially because there's a limited amount of products around the house. So all of our new projects are going to be something that you'd probably have readily available. So if you don't have paint, you can easily do this with crayons, but I'm going to show you how to adapt it using paint, because paint is since it's slippery and sensory, it's a really easy medium for many abilities to kind of manipulate. So we start by using pieces of paper and adding paint to those pieces of paper. Now, a lot of times in classes, I walk into classrooms and there's small paintbrushes that look like this. I'll put this way and you can see it better. Okay, so this is basically about a 1/4 inch brush, and this is really hard for little hands to use. It's also because it requires a certain amount of control. On a project like this where you can get messy, you can use fingers. You don't even need to use a paintbrush. You could also use toys, taking a big, chunky truck that a child could run across, run that right through the paper or paint and right across the paper. It makes all kinds of great patterns. You can also easily use things like the caps, like this, the cap of this glue. You can take that off and use it as a stamp. So if your child isn't able to fully use the tripod grasp, that's the tripod grasp, where we're holding our pencil with those 3 fingers. This finger is my support finger, and this is my control finger. Actually, this is kind of the control finger, but this is not easy for everyone to do. So the first thing you can do is at lakeshore.com and there's other sites, you can get pencil grips that kind of guide your children's fingers where they should be. So they're really inexpensive. Most of them are under $2. You slide them onto the pencil or paintbrush, and then you can hold it. Or you can make your own pencil grip at home by just taking painter's tape or masking tape, and then it makes it easier, larger, and more easy for the child to grasp that and control it. Now, the other thing we have to consider is maybe children, can't even grasp something this small. then you can look at it like how can they hold the paintbrush? How can they, if they're interested in doing the painting, how can they hold it? If this is all a child is able to do, obviously you want to try your child to get this kind of grip, but if it's about involvement and keeping them interested in what you're doing, there's nothing wrong with this type of grip. Also, if you have a child that's in a wheelchair with limited upper mobility, then you can use a roller. And what I love about this is that Eric Carle uses these type of tools themselves. If you've ever seen Eric Carle, he rolls out his paper, uses a big brush, and brushes like a janitor's size brush. So here's another technique. This is a super long one that I got at Home Depot. I say that with the roller, these are about $15. The cool thing about this is at the end, there's a little screw bottom, and you can unscrew a push broom, use that extension, screw it right in there, and it makes it about 6 feet long. So you could roll out a piece of paper or put a piece of paper down with trash bags underneath it, attach the device to your child's wheelchair tray, never to the child, always to the tray, and then the child simply rolls across and it rolls back and forward. So even if you have a child that uses a mouthpiece to control their wheelchair, they can still roll back and forth and do this art. That is kind of the core of what adaptation means. So if we're looking at all the different, those are all the different techniques for using paint brushes and rollers. But then there's also things you can do so that your child can hold the paintbrush better. And I cannot stress enough that these should be the least restrictive products, that you should never tape to your child's hand. You should never do any of that. But what you can do is if your child wears a glove or a brace, you can tape to that glove. You just don't want to, ever bind your child. So what I've done here is we had some old gloves that they don't fit us anymore because our fingers are longer, but they do fit the base of our hand. So all I need to do is, if I have a child that can do this, has this range of motion, but can't necessarily use the tripod grip to hold the pencil, what I can simply do is slip this paintbrush right in the center and then put it down to like right about here. And then my child can simply paint on the paper like that. Now, if I have a child that his hands are forward, but he doesn't have this range of mobility, then I can manipulate the paper. So the easiest thing to do is to take, like, this is a chicken nuggets box. So all I did was cut this out and then tape the paper to it so that I have added stability, because the paper is pretty flimsy. I mean, it's really hard to hold a paper steady. You can also use canvases. You don't have to use exactly what is suggested. This is how we adapt. And then I say to the child, would you like to go right or left? And if the child has the ability to say right, I move the paper to the right. And the child keeps their arm steady and I move the canvas. So am I creating part of the art? Sure. But my child is as engaged as my child can be. And that's the point of doing any kind of art. So child is steady, I'm moving and manipulating. Now, if you have a child that's like pulling away or just, isn't enjoying this, then guess what? This project isn't for you. And it doesn't mean, that your child isn't engaged. It just means you have to engage them in a different way. Maybe it's not through this type of art. Maybe it's simply putting the tray down and the child moves his fingers through the paint. And if he can't move the fingers through the paint, then maybe it's through song or sound or a sensory project. So the next thing is cutting, which is so hard. Cutting is one of the most difficult things. So if you have a piece of paper like this, you don't have to cut. Most kids can tear. So if you tear out a petal shape, there's no reason that is more important than a petal shape that's been cut. So if your child can't tear, that's okay too. This may be the part of the project that your child can do, and then you can cut those pieces out. Or there's a Cricut, which is helps you feed papers in. And then cuts it for you. as long as your child is engaged and watching and being a part of the project, that's also okay. So another tips about scissors. I like to use a hot glue gun to create a raised petal. There we go, you can see that, a raised petal shape, and that allows the child to keep the scissors steady because they have a barrier. It's like not being able to drive past a cone. You have this, this cone, it dries clear, and you again, children should never use this because it's a hot glue gun, but that allows the scissor to easily guide along that edge. And there's not that big of a difference between what is here originally and this. You just get a little bit of a raised edge. Again, it's what's important to your child. Also, in regards to what type of scissors your child uses, this is my favorite type of scissor because you see it has the larger hole on the top, or sorry, a smaller hole on the top, larger hole on the bottom. I can fit my thumb and my fingers in the bottom. If you have a bigger hand, like my husband, you can fit 3 in the bottom. That allows me to control the scissors very easily. This is the non-effective type of scissor because this right here is super hard, even for me. So I need to, if I'm going to be using this scissor, I'm going to be bracing my finger, using this other finger to brace on the outside, which makes it a lot harder. I have to put a lot more effort into using this smaller scissor because of the type of, and if I turn it around, see, it's not obvious which is the top and which is the bottom. So this type of scissor, I do not recommend it for anyone, but especially for a child with special needs. So here, safety scissors, the bad thing about safety scissors is that they don't cut as well as other scissors. So if you have a child that's struggling with hand strength, sometimes safety scissors are frustrating. However, the cool thing about safety scissors is it's an obvious top and bottom. It's easier to grip because your weight is on the bottom. And then also, it's also how you hold the paper. So if I am a parent, I can I can have the child just open and close, open very wide, because children have the tendency to just open a little bit and then cut these little tiny things, but it's actually much more efficient to open really wide and cut really long, then open really wide again and cut really long. It's these tiny chops that it's kind of how kids fail, and it also takes much more effort. So if you as a parent are guiding and letting them follow the line, they can actually just do the snipping, the cutting. So then there's gluing. So the most common glue that everyone wants to use is Elmer's glue. If you've ever gone into a kindergarten and used Elmer's glue, you will know that every child turns it upside down like this and squeezes the crap out of it, and you have this giant pool of glue. So I recommend letting them do that in the beginning. If they can squeeze, let them squeeze that giant pool out, and then use a paintbrush, an old paintbrush, because it's going to be hard to get this this clean afterward. You're going to need to use warm soapy water immediately after using a paintbrush with glue, dabbing into that glue, and then painting on the pieces. It has a lot more control this way than this big gloppy kind of stuff, but it works. It works easily, very, very easily. Or they can use rubber cement. Now, the bummer about rubber cement is that it does have a toxic kind of smell, but it does have this really large cap that's easier to grasp and a paintbrush at the end of it. So if you're not going to be using this type of paintbrush, you can use this. And the beauty of rubber cement is that you can easily pick up and replace your art. So if you put it in the wrong place, no problem. If you do it with Elmer's glue or school glue, it winds up kind of destroying the original project. So these are adaptations that we're going to use next week when we work on Sally Plah's book, Benji, The Bad Day, and Me. This is a really great book about a young guy with autism and his brother is actually the one having a bad day. It's Sally Plah is a local author who herself has autism, so it's a really charming sibling book. We're going to be doing a craft and a sensory project based on this lovely book, and we'll see you next Tuesday.